RTS is not dead. It just stopped chasing the mainstream. These are 10 RTS games still worth your time in 2026. Warcraft III Reforged is not the safest recommendation on this list. Its launch was rough, and for many players, the name Reforged still leaves a bad taste. But underneath the controversy, Warcraft III is still built on one of the most interesting RTS designs ever made. This is not just about building a base and producing an army. Warcraft III adds hero management, leveling, items, neutral creep camps, and abilities that can completely change a fight. Humans, orcs, night elves, and undead all play differently. Each race has its own economy, rhythm, army flow, and hero focus. Winning is not only about making more units, it is about reading the map, protecting your hero, and hitting at the right time. If you are curious about the line between RTS and RPG, Warcraft III still deserves a look. Not the cleanest pick here, but still one of the most characterful RTS ideas ever made. Command & Conquer Remastered Collection is still one of the best ways to go back to the roots of RTS. The formula is simple. Gather resources, build a base, produce units, control the map, and strike before your opponent is ready. Tiberian Dawn and Red Alert may feel old today. Unit behavior, pathfinding, and some mission design clearly come from another era. But the core rhythm still works. The Remastered Collection makes that classic structure much easier to enjoy on modern screens, with updated visuals, a cleaner interface, a map editor, and legendary soundtracks. If you want a fast, direct, no-nonsense base-building RTS, Command & Conquer still holds up. Homeworld Remastered Collection is one of the most different RTS experiences on this list, because the battlefield is not a flat map. It is space. You are controlling fleets in a three-dimensional combat zone, where positioning, formation, attack angles, and distance actually matter. Homeworld does not follow the usual rhythm of building a base, mass-producing units, and rushing the enemy. It feels more atmospheric, more tactical, and much more cinematic. You are not just fighting over a front line. You are guiding the fate of a space fleet. It is not the fastest entry point for every player. It moves slower and asks for patience. But it gives you a sense of scale and atmosphere that very few RTS games can match. Sometimes, strategy begins when you stop thinking in two dimensions. Dawn of War represents one of the most aggressive branches of RTS. This is not a game that wants you to sit back and build forever. It wants you on the map, capturing points, holding territory, fighting constantly, pushing before your opponent can breathe. The Warhammer 40,000 universe fits that perfectly. Dawn of War is brutal, loud, and heavy. Squad-based battles, armored units, savage melee fights, and constant pressure are at the center of the experience. There is macro here, but do not expect the same economy loop you get from Age of Empires or StarCraft. Dawn of War is more about territory control, unit usage, and aggressive momentum. That is why it does not go all the way to the top. But leaving it out would feel wrong. If you want an RTS that feels dirtier, heavier, and more war-focused, Dawn of War is still a powerful pick. Rise of Nations is one of the best blends of RTS and grand strategy ideas. At first, it looks close to Age of Empires. You build cities, gather resources, research technologies, produce armies, and move through different ages. But Rise of Nations has its own identity, because map control is not only about armies, it is also about borders. Expanding territory, founding new cities, growing your national borders, and thinking about your economy over the long term are all central to the game. It feels less like you are only commanding an army, and more like you are guiding a rising civilization. Yes, it can feel old today. The interface and presentation do not have the comfort of newer RTS games, but the design still has real strength. If you like Age of Empires but want more scale, more civilization management, and more long-term pressure, Rise of Nations is still worth playing. This is not a pure reflex test. It is about controlling the map, the pace, and history itself.
Supreme Commander Forged Alliance does not waste time with small skirmishes. This game makes you feel like you are managing an entire war front. On one side of the map, your ground army might be pushing forward. Somewhere else, you might be planning an airstrike. At sea, you might be building a fleet. And back at your base, an experimental unit might be coming online. The power of Forged Alliance is scale. Mass and energy economy, production chains, defensive lines, tech levels, and long-term war planning all shape the match. The strategic zoom is still brilliant. 1 second, you are on the front line. The next, you pull back and read the entire battlefield like a command table. This is not for quick, short matches. It takes time to learn, and the big picture can be demanding. But if you want huge maps, huge armies, and truly large-scale RTS warfare, Forged Alliance still stands in a place very few games have reached. Tempest Rising is one of the clearest modern answers to the hunger for classic RTS. This game knows exactly what it wants to be. It takes the Command and Conquer energy and brings the base-building RTS formula back with a modern presentation. You gather resources, you build a base, you construct production buildings, you fight for map control. You look for the right timing to apply pressure. No confusion, no identity crisis. This is a real RTS. What makes Tempest Rising valuable is that it does not try to reinvent the whole genre. It understands the formula, respects it, and makes it smoother, cleaner, and more readable for modern players. The atmosphere also carries that old RTS campaign energy. Serious, dramatic, and just a little over the top. Is it perfect? No. But if you want a classic base-building RTS in 2026, Tempest Rising should be on your list. Sometimes we do not need a revolution. Sometimes we just need a strong formula to come back properly. Beyond All Reason is one of the most interesting games on this list, because this is not a big studio release. It is free, it is community developed, and it is still growing into one of the most serious, large-scale RTS experiences you can play right now. At first, it can be intimidating. The interface, the economy, the systems, and the size of the battles are not exactly beginner-friendly. But once you start to understand it, you also start to understand why it has built such a dedicated RTS audience. Massive maps, hundreds, sometimes thousands of units, real-time projectile physics, energy and metal economy, air control, artillery pressure, huge team battles. The whole game feels like a war machine that keeps expanding. Beyond All Reason may not feel like a fully polished, big-budget product yet, but the RTS spirit here is extremely alive. And because it is free, trying it is easy. So yes, putting it this high might look bold, but I think it deserves it. If you want an RTS where the battle spreads until the whole map is on fire, Beyond All Reason is very hard to ignore. StarCraft II is still one of the sharpest blades in competitive RTS. It is older now, but its mechanical clarity, speed, and readability are still incredible. This game does not hide your mistakes. Forget worker production and you fall behind. Put your army in the wrong position and it melts in seconds. Stop watching the map and suddenly your base is gone. Terran, Zerg, and Protoss are not just 3 different-looking armies. They require different ways of thinking. Terran plays with positioning, pressure, and flexibility. Zerg spreads across the map and overwhelms with production waves. Protoss breaks the rhythm with technology, timing, and powerful units. One of StarCraft II's greatest strengths is how clearly everything reads. Fights are fast, but they are not messy. When you lose, you usually understand why you lost. That makes the game brutal, but also deeply educational. It is no longer in its golden age, and the pro scene is not as massive as it once was. But if we are talking about pure RTS skill, StarCraft II is still impossible to dismiss. If you want something fast, competitive, clean, and punishing, StarCraft II remains one of the highest points of the genre. Age of Empires II Definitive Edition takes the top spot because it is not just a nostalgic legend. It is still played, still updated, still competitive, and still capable of making new players say, "One more game." Its strength begins with simplicity. Make villagers, gather resources, advance through the ages, build an army, control the map. At first, it all seems easy to understand, but the deeper you go, the more that simple structure opens up. Do you pressure in feudal age or rush toward castle age? Who controls the gold? Is your opponent making archers, cavalry, or preparing a tower rush? Where should your next town center go? Age of Empires II gives you room to think, but it never lets you sleep. Definitive Edition brought that old structure into the modern era, with huge content, many civilizations, long campaigns, active multiplayer, and continued updates. It is not just an old classic, it is a living RTS ecosystem. You can play it casually against the AI, you can play team games with friends, or you can climb the ranked ladder and suffer properly. If you want to play RTS in 2026 and you do not know where to start, Age of Empires II Definitive Edition is still the strongest overall answer. Old, but not outdated. Simple on the surface, deep underneath. Nostalgic, but still alive. That's my list of the best RTS games to play in 2026. Does Age of Empires II still deserve the crown? Drop your top 3 RTS games in the comments. Let's see if this starts a strategy war. See you in the next one!